Alright, well welcome class. This will be our first experience here with our flipped classroom. We're going to take a peek at section 1.1, which is over evaluating expressions. And I have a pretty good feeling that this should be a pretty easy section for you. So it will allow us both to adjust and get used to it. So bear with me as I give my first video a try here. Well, at least my first video with my new tools. So the first thing I'm going to do here is point out the vocabulary. And in terms of vocabulary, I think the words there are pretty familiar to you. Variable, algebraic expression, evaluating an expression is what we're going to be doing here, and that's the important one. It's the fact that we're going to substitute a number in place of the variable, perform an operation, and simplify the result. Now let's talk about that word there. We use this word simplify, but we don't define it till down here. Take a peek. To make simpler or easier, to reduce in complexity. This may involve doing several operations. So the idea of making simple or simplifying is what we're going to be focused on. The last skill that we're really going to do here is to talk about these three words here: power, base, and exponent. When we talk about power, we're talking about the whole thing. So when we're looking at something like 3x to the 5th power or 2x squared, we're going to be talking about that whole piece as being a power expression. When we look at the base, we're looking at just simply the number or the letter that has an exponent on it. So that when we look at, or the number that's being used as the factor. In these two examples, I used x as my base. I could just as easily have said 7 to the 4th power, and 7 would be my base. So it's a repeated multiplication. It's telling me to take 7 times 7 times 7 times 7. And then obviously I think you're pretty familiar with the idea that the exponent is that little number. This 5 is my exponent. And this 2 up here is an exponent. That 2 out in front is called a coefficient, but we're not going to see that word for another day or two. So those are our vocabulary words. Let's go ahead and take a peek at what we're going to do. Now, we're really going to be looking at algebraic expressions here. And when we look at algebraic expressions, I think you're pretty familiar with them. I mean, I don't think anything over here in this expressions column is all that different or new. I want you to be very conscious, though, this year of understanding what it means when you look at it. So I'm pretty confident that you know that this is telling you to do x divided by 20. What I'm not so sure about, though, is that if you understand that that sentence, x divided by 20, is the same as saying the quotient of x and 20. When we look at that idea, that's something that we haven't seen very often, or we only see it occasionally. I want you to be very comfortable with that word quotient. I also want you to understand that x is in the numerator and 20 would go in the denominator. So that when we look at the last one, I know you want to say y minus 8. That's the most common, right? You want to say y minus 8. But y minus 8 is pretty basic. We're really going to be looking at the difference between y and 8, or the difference of y and 8. So the word that we might see more often, or the one that we're going to be writing more often, is the difference of a number, right? Because that's what that y is standing for, a number and 8. So if we use that same idea and we go to our next piece here, we know 12 plus a, but how would you do that differently? Take a second, pause the video, write it down, make an idea. We just did y minus 8 and we used difference. You know the word. So hopefully you paused it and you're really coming back to me. But here, what I was really hoping you would write is the sum of 12 and a number a. Now I'm pretty confident that you're familiar with this one. Let me see if I can change my color pen here. No, come all the way down. Just cheat. I like purple. Let's switch to purple. Alright. Now, I'm pretty confident that you understand that when I use the word operation, I'm talking about these guys up here. Add, subtract, multiply, and divide. Pick the proper operation. We know that when we say 7 times t, or the product, hint, hint, it wasn't there, but it should be, right? We should have the word product because we are multiplying. Multiplication. Ooh, that didn't fit very nicely, did it? And we already wrote down division. I'm pretty sure that you can write subtraction, but hey, just in case, let's put it down here. And then last, but certainly not least, is our friend addition and all of those pieces. Let's go to the next one. So then the last piece here is to go ahead and take a peek at what happens and what are we going to be doing with these expressions. And the first piece that we're going to do is evaluation. And I'm positive you know how to do these. So I'm going to give you a second to fill them in, and then we'll come back and talk about the result and what happened. So as we're taking a peek here, you can see that I went ahead and I did all the problems. If we're looking here at problem, the very first one here on the page, you'll notice it's an addition. We plugged it in. I don't think anyone had any trouble there. I want to make sure we talk about this middle problem here, because on this middle problem, when we're talking about substituting in that 5.5, I want to make sure that we start our year off properly, and that when you see that I've given you a decimal, then my expectation is that if you can make it into a fraction, because all decimals are fractions, that you should. But if not, then the standing rule all year is that if I give you a decimal is an acceptable answer, although it's not always the easiest. If I give you a fraction, like I did over here in the third problem, then my expectation is that you will only give me a fraction answer. There'll be times when some of those things are a little bit different, and we'll talk about them, but you can expect that generally speaking, I give you a decimal, you can give me a decimal, you don't have to, and I give you a fraction, you must give me a fraction. I will not be happy if you give me a decimal, most of the time. Alright, so example 2. I already kind of alluded to this whole exponents and powers piece, but let's take another second here and talk about them. Notice that we have some vocabulary. It's asking you to show what are you going to say when you see it, and what are you going to do to solve it. So this says 12 to the first power. It's telling us that our base is 12 and it's only being multiplied once, or there's only one 12 in the multiplication, so that our answer would be 12. Part B, 2 to the third power, or 2, do you know it? Hope so. 2 cubed. Remember, it's telling us our base or our factor is 2, and that there are 3 of them in the multiplication, so that the answer would be 2 to the third power. Oh, that was pretty silly of me. Not 2 to the third power. 2 to the third power is equal to, how silly, Sturgeon, 8. There we go. All right, reading again, part C. 1/4 to the second power, or 1/4, yep, you got it, squared. Remember, the base is 1/4, and the exponent is 2, or squared. So that means that I take my base and I use it twice, or 2 times. Then I perform my multiplication straight across the top when you multiply. 1 times 1 is 1, 4 times 4 is 16. Alright, a to the 4th power. When we start getting this high, 4th power and higher, we start getting out of the realm where we're really going to be actually solving. So remember, the base is a, and we're multiplying it together 4 times. And since in this example they didn't tell us what a was equal to, we really can't simplify this any further. We can't do any further mathematics, so that this acceptable answer would simply be a to the 4th, because we can't do anything more with it. Now I think I've given you the answers here. Again, take a moment, solve it, and we'll come back and fix it. Take a peek. I hope you really practiced it. Hope you're back. Did you pause? If you didn't pause, make sure you go back and pause. I mean it. Alright. So, the base of part A, if you were listening, you should have written a 12. The exponent of part A, 1. What was the base of part C? 1/4. And the exponent of part C? 2. I hope you got all of those. Alright, here's a checkpoint. I want you to do these 3 all on your own. As you can see here, hopefully you stopped and you actually went back and did the checkpoint. But you should have 7 to the 5th power, 1/3 to the 2nd power, or 1/3 squared, 1 4/10 cubed, or 1 4/10 to the 3rd power. And again, you wrote out the products. Make sure you read the directions. In this chapter, that's what's going to catch you the most. If you're not reading your directions, you're going to get caught. So then the last one is, given an algebraic expression and a value for the variable, evaluate. Notice that key word there. It says evaluate. That means that you need to get an answer at the end of your problem. So that y to the 3rd when y is equal to 6. The quotient of b and d when b is equal to 6.2 and d is equal to 2.4. Y to the 3rd. So there's your workspace. Again, give them a try. Come back and check your work, and I'll explain them then. Alright, so then I guess that hopefully you've paused it and you're coming back to me. I want to point out to you that at letter A, the answer is pretty obvious and everyone should have gotten 216. I also want to point out that I showed my work off to the side there longhand because I want you to be remembering that there will be times when using your brain will be faster. So I want you to remember to practice, especially this week. Practice, practice, practice those basic skills. On Friday you'll be taking a test. It's a placement test, but I want you to be prepared so that you can take it without the calculator. Because you will not get one. It'll be the only test this year where, pretty much the only test this year where you won't get a calculator. Second, I want to point out in problem B that they gave you decimals and that we can divide longhand using decimals over here. But sometimes it is easier to do fractions. I divided by 3, then I divided by 2. I couldn't simplify any further, so I was done. So those are your notes for section 1.1. I hope they weren't too painful, and thanks very much. See you in the next video.